up in Orange County in a not very cool place. Went to a school that with a bunch of people who did not like movies or TV shows or anything. So I kind of had to find my own way around that. And then I also joined a band with my older brother during this time. And so rather than like when I was finishing high school at 18, rather than try to actually make any real life decisions, I just focused on the band. I went to college, but just for like a degree that was not in film. And then I focused on the band for the next 10 years or so, all as a way to just avoid real life responsibility. But then as our kind of crappy indie rock band plateaued and the touring days were done, and I was 26 maybe or 27, I just realized like I don't want to do this anymore. But there's only one thing that I didn't know how to do it, but one thing I want to do, and that could bring me happiness in any sense that would not make me really, really bummed out about life. And that was to, try to make movies or TV shows or something, because pretty much from the time I saw Jurassic Park in 1993 to that time when I was 26 or 27 and Lost, like movies were a part of my DNA and identity. And all I cared about was finding people to talk about movies with and talk about TV shows with and make these things. I had never written anything real, really. Like I had done short stories here and there, and I had written a couple scripts with my older brother, but otherwise, like I'd never written anything on my own until I decided to apply to AFI for film school, which is a way too expensive film school, which is why this program is so great, because it just makes you kind of bypass all that student debt. But I decided to just go deep into debt to go to AFI for film school. And I wrote the very first thing I ever had written by myself was my sample that I just stayed up one night and wrote that to turn in to apply. And then I applied, got in. And then on the very first day of school, I met Max. And that was like, first going to that school, and for the first time in my life where I was surrounded by a bunch of people 150 people who all wanted to talk about movies and TV shows, when like I have one friend from high school, one friend from college, but otherwise like all my friends are from my band years. And then all of a sudden I'm in a school where that's what everybody wants to do. And that was truly an exciting, like rewarding experience. And then on top of all that, getting to meet somebody that like I just immediately, hit it off with, both, like our tastes line up in both music and film and TV, and our outlook on life, both being little brothers. And then just our general, like just kind of sensibilities, like getting to meet that person, Max, on the very first day was kind of it's just a miracle. Got very lucky. And then from that point on, Max and I just, we decided to just collaborate a bunch. We made a short together, our first short together there. We made our thesis film together. And when we finished school, we were like, let's do our first movie together. And that's what Palm Springs was, just 5 years later. We'll get more into the Palm Springs stuff.
We're gonna get more. Don't give everything away. Although I did have a question as how did you and Max meet? So that's going off my question list. But okay, Max, I'm gonna turn it over to you next.
I can't really remember a time where I didn't want to do the movie thing. And I think I was thinking about this. It's funny. The question is like origin stories, because I'm adopted, and it was a thing that I grew up always knowing. I was born in Washington, D.C., but grew up in California. And the family that adopted me, the Barbakows, are this very emotionally messy and loving and funny family. And it was a story that I was always told growing up of how I ended up with them. So I think a love of stories and a love of character, because everyone was very colorful in a character sense, who was involved in that story, was always kind of instilled in me and something I was interested in. And then my family also loved movies, everything from like early James Bond movies to my brother, who was 7 years older than me, who I'm very close with, showed me all these great movies that were made in the 90s outside the studio system that were really inappropriate for me to see at the age that I saw them at, and seemed really inventive and cool. So it's something that I always knew I wanted to do. And the first thing I ever made and finished was a documentary about my adoption, where I learned kind of what you're doing right now. Like I see the same look in your eyes from staring at a computer screen all night editing stuff that I had when I was making that. And it's like it's such a cool feeling to be working on something that you're really into and kind of, you know, learning by doing. But once I made that, it was kind of the best story I knew, and I feel like I poured myself into it. So I decided out of college, I moved to New York City and started doing a lot of freelance documentary stuff that took me around the world, and tried to accrue more life experiences and meet more people and have adventures and just get some context about, you know, the world at large. And I always knew I wanted to go make narrative movies. And after a stint at doing that, I found myself at AFI, where I met Andy. He kind of told you how we fell in love over kind of shared similar mothers, similar older brothers, similar dynamics, similar tastes in things. And the rest is kind of what you see in Palm Springs and what Andy described.
I love that. Well, now I'm going to go to Becky, and it's kind of perfect because before the students, you guys got on, Becky and I were talking about, we saw each other across a hall at Endeavor, and we're like, please be friends with me because everyone else here is crazy. And I was like, Becky, please be my friend. Seriously, I need friends. And Becky, I don't know if you know this, but I was actually 20 at Endeavor and lying about my age.
Oh, I know.
Oh, you knew.
I bought you some drinks.
Yeah.
At some point, yes.
Yeah.
You're like, so I can't go up to the bar. Do you mind?
Yeah. That was definitely because I was also so shy that I couldn't go get drinks because going to Endeavor, everyone would make fun of me. So it was like, Becky, help. So true story. So Becky, give us your origin story.
Okay. You're stealing my, my thunder by telling that part of it. No, I'm kidding. But I'm from Philadelphia, and always, you know, kind of similar to what, Andy was saying and Max, but I just always loved movies and TV in a way where I felt like these characters were my friends, or I saw myself in them in a way that, you know, the best art can do. And I didn't think of it in those terms. I was just like, I watch a lot of TV. I'm an only child and my parents are divorced and no one like knows what I'm up to, but I'm just going to watch this episode of Kate and Allie for the 98th time. A reference no one on the Zoom gets, I'm sure. But no, so I just always loved it, and then went to college and never thought about getting into the movie industry. I didn't know anyone in the industry, and I think, you know, this is what is also so great about this program. I think when you see something as a possibility, then you pursue it, but if you don't know that it is, it makes it so much harder. So didn't really have any role model for it, but just always loved it, and had, you know, worked in politics for a bit, and then I worked for a university for a little while, and then kind of finally got the courage to move out here to LA. And Rachel was one of my first friends, so we go back for almost 20 years at this point. I'm really dating us. They
don't know how old I am. I've been lying this whole time.
So sorry, guys. She's not 28, and right. But so we started. I think you were there a bit before me, but we started at a talent agency, which is also one of the things that I think, unless you know exactly your path in this town, that, you know, Max is clearly a director, Andy is clearly a writer, like that, you know what your goal is. If you don't know that, I always recommend, whether you're interning or starting there as an assistant, just being in an agency, at a talent agency, is so, so valuable. And so that was great experience. And then have had sort of a winding path, but went from an agency to, I was an assistant at Universal Pictures, and then I was a producer based there, and then I was a studio executive at MGM, and then worked at a few other companies, and then I took a few years off to be home full-time with my kids, and then came back and was working full-time. And then a couple of years later, an amazing script called Palm Springs came our way, and we met with Max and Andy, and the rest is really history.
Well, I'm going to drill in a little bit on that process. So don't give that part away yet.
Don't worry.
But I do want to say to the class, Becky, and I'm not making this up. So we were assistants together, and I knew at the time that Becky was going to run a studio one day. 100%.
You're very kind.
We talked about this for years. Because
Yes.
I was like, I have too big of a mouth and I talk back and I would not do well. But Becky is so good.
You're very kind. Thank you.
It's true. And I was like, I just want to be friends with her because she's a boss and also a nice person. And I'm just super excited to be able to say I told you so and I was right.
You're so kind. Thank you. Thank you.
So I feel very good about that. So I want to dive into a little bit about collaborating as writers and directors because we have just gone through making 5 shorts. We've just gone through this process. So I'd love to talk a little bit of how you two kind of worked on this script as this director-writer collaboration. No, Andy, did you put yourself
muted.
When we finished school and I was graduated summer of 2015, and it was at that point we're like, let's do our first movie together. I'll write it, you direct it. Let's come up with the idea together. Let's do something that is super cheap. And he and I went out to Palm Springs, talked about like what we wanted, like talked about life more than anything else. But we kind of talked about like, actually out of those talks about life, we came up with this character of Niles, who is the one that Andy plays. And the idea of setting it around one primary location. So first we backed ourselves into this kind of corner in a sense to kind of try to keep a contained, cheaper and achievable movie. Over the next couple of years, as like I worked on other things and then came back to it and he worked on other things, came back to it. It evolved into something bigger than a tiny movie. It was still a small movie, but just, I think both of our instincts we like a bigger set piece. We like dinosaurs. But throughout that whole process, before the script was done, the way that worked was and luckily Max and I had, 2 years of training for this too, 2 years of really trying to understand each other and work with other people and learn how to collaborate with other people. And that's why we kept coming back together. And so anytime he and I would get together, we just get into a room and just talk about everything. And I'd say the most important part of any collaboration, because this carried on through when we hooked up with Andy and Becky and The Lonely Island and everything, is that there was nothing that was off limits. It was almost like Max and I will say it was like a form of therapy for each other. We were kind of acting as each other's therapists. We allowed ourselves to be totally vulnerable with each other and share our deepest fears and shame. And movies are all the best movies come out of shame, I'd say. But you have to we, especially through school, but we learn how to access that part, and then because we can access that part, we learn how to just be totally open with each other. So then he and I would have these long discussions, and then out of those discussions we'd have different ideas that just formed in this soup. I would go take the soup or take the ingredients and then try to make something out of that. And sometimes when you're working with a director or we're collaborating, you'll write, let's say you write a script, 120 pages or whatever it is, and then you'll pass it off to the director. They'll give you their notes. Then you go back and you do a rewrite. For Max and I, it was a little different in that this is I would encourage for any collaborator when you feel as close as he and I did, is I would go off and write. Then if I'm in the middle of a scene and I'm excited about it, I would just take a screenshot with my computer and then just text it over to Max. So with the hope was that I was going to get a reaction out of him, I'd laugh or an emoji of some sort. And if not, then I know that I failed. And that was one of the best parts about it. And Max has talked about this in other interviews we've done, is that because no one else cared about us at all, especially in those years after AFI, and this is before we met Becky and the Lonely Island, it was just us two for those few years. So therefore, I had one person I was trying to entertain. I had an audience of one, and that was Max. And then any of his notes, any of his ideas, his was an audience of one, which was me. And so we were just trying to make each other laugh with anything that we were bringing to the table for 3 years until we hooked up with him. Anything you want to add to that, Max?
I would say just that audience of one. It's something I think about that a lot on any project, because there's, especially when you move into production and stuff gets bigger, you have a lot of stuff coming at you, and it's the same thing. What was so great about working with Becky and the dudes is that we all were speaking the same language and knew what like the core DNA of the idea that was exciting to us, and we were able to protect it. But it really stemmed from what Andy's talking about, which is just I was trying to please Andy with my notes or with decisions that I would make, and Andy was trying to please me with the stuff that he was writing. And it's really, with any project, I think it's important to always think about, I always try to assign like one person, whether that's like a historical figure or a family member or like a collaborator that I want to like it, in order to keep the vision kind of like very pure and straightforward. And I think that's what a good collaboration is too. It's not, its best idea wins, and it's about kind of serving the idea through the process with one another. And then if you really like the people, it's like the best. It's my favorite part of this experience was the making of it with people. And we'll get into the making of the movie, but there's no way the movie gets made at the scale and the quality it does if we didn't have people across the board in every department who took ownership over it and elevated it and just wanted to serve something that they were into.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think like, especially as more people got added to the team, we have to do this thing, multiple times. But even when it was just me and Max, I think an important part for both of us was like, strip away the ego. It was not my movie. It was not Max's movie. It was our thing together at that time. And then when more people got involved, then it's theirs. It's like, so anyone, like, at least how I looked at it, it's like, I can't be precious about this thing because it's just, all these are just words on a piece of paper. That doesn't mean anything. The movie itself is a culmination of everybody involved. So therefore, like, if I there's another writer that told me this recently, like, his advice to writers who like really are very precious about their words and aren't as into collaborating is like, just go write a book then. You don't need to make movies.
I love that. So I have a quick question, and then Becky, I'm coming to you. I'm just curious, how many drafts of the script do you think you did before Becky even saw it?
There were many failed versions, false starts of the script before there was even a time loop involved in the movie, when it was just like, it was a different version with still in the world, same characters. And there were, I don't know, a handful of those. I'd say before Becky got in there, upwards of, it depends on what constitutes like a full draft, because there's like varying degrees. But I know I have over 100 files of
I was getting somewhere because we did a lot of drafts, so I was getting to like a big number. So that was great.
I feel like the anxiety is alleviated just when it comes to drafts, when you actually have something to rewrite. That's the key. It's like when you get past the blank page or even the bad version of a draft, that's when the real work starts. And that's like, Andy was totally tireless with that for sure. I think the script that like made it onto the internet, someone sent it to me, the file name is actually like, and this is the one that we went out with to get money, is like Niles version 27 or something like that.
Yeah.
I love that. So that was just a curiosity question. But Becky, perfect segue. Thank you, Max, for setting that up for me. How did you find this script by two unknowns who hadn't made a feature? Tell us about that.
I wish I could tell you that I was like really like digging around and like found these guys and it's all me, but that is not the case. So, and I think Max and Andy can fill in the other half of this probably, but from where I sat, so I was running a company called Party Over Here, which was Andy Samberg and the Lonely Islands company. And this script came Andy's way as, will you attach to star in this? And we have this great script and we have this great director attached, and Andy read it and loved it. And then Max and Andy came in and we all met and kind of fell in love. And they were, Max and Andy, really amenable to not just, of course, Andy starring, but us coming on board to produce the movie. So I would love to take credit for having found it, but it was the opposite. We just weren't dumb enough to say, I don't know. You know, we saw the gold, and I don't mean that in a riches way. I mean,
You can mean it in both. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to talk about that process a little bit, Andy and Max, of like, how did you know Becky was the one? I mean, I always know she's the one, but I'm curious. I'm assuming you met with others, with you specifically.
Who cares about Andy Samberg? It was really Becky Sloviter. That's who we want to work with.
We heard rumors about this Becky woman that were like, I don't care, but let's get it to her.
Yeah, who cares about this movie stuff?
Whatever, but
it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, there was when we finished it and we started passing around the people we knew, and it was still just me and Max on this little team. Anyone that would read the log line, they're like, we got enough time loop wedding movies that sound stupid, and it does sound stupid on the page. And also, it's a bigger movie. It was bigger than that, that small budget movie than we initially set out for. I ended up getting. I started working with this manager who started passing it around. Once he started passing it around at the top of, like 2018. I think managers, and you can probably speak to that, I think managers and agents kind of get off on withholding information. And
Sure.
Yeah.
I disagree.
As a manager, I take offense to that. No.
But so it was throughout that next, like once Sam, my manager, started taking it out over the next month and a half, like he didn't really, I kind of just took a backseat and was like, I was okay with not knowing. It was a big, personal move for me. I feel like I usually have to know everything. I let him do his thing, but like Max and I would just get emails like, okay, we got you a meeting here, got you a meeting here. We didn't know a lot of these places that they were being sent. And we started meeting producers and financiers and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, I remember we were leaving a meeting that was kind of a bad meeting, a meeting that we were not excited to work with this person. And then I got a call from a manager saying, so Andy Samberg read it and he wants to meet. And Max and I did not even know that it had been sent to Andy and Party Over Here, which is their company. And immediately Max and I was like, okay, cool. And we met them and
fell
from
in
that
love.
point,
I was gonna say, and like did fall in love. Like I think it was, you could tell. I mean, Max was saying this earlier, but it's true. Like we all were trying to make the same movie, and you could see that immediately. It wasn't like this is great, but what if we took it in this direction, or we see it differently, or the tone is a little this or that. It was just clearly like an immediate, a puzzle kind of fitting together, which is really, because the process of making a movie is so challenging. If you at least have that, great. That as a foundation, I think is so important.
For sure. And let's talk about a little making this movie and how you guys went about it. I'd love to dive in. Max, maybe if you want to take it away, like, did you always have such a clear vision? Did you come to that vision? Was that like what you walked into Becky and said, this, here's the script, this is my vision? Let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, since we had been working on it for so long, and since it was a thing, even as it evolved into a time loop idea and a different iteration of what it was, like the tone was always pretty much there, as were kind of the texture of it and what I wanted it to like feel like and sound like. That was a big part of that first discussion, is like, this is what the movie's going to be. And it changed too once Andy Samberg, like, he came into the equation, and it almost more of its essence clicked in when you have a performer like that. And thinking about, I remember we talked about a lot of the half-hour comedies that were on TV at the time that were tonally a little blended and complex, and like Eternal Sunshine and Punch Drunk Love, and taking a comedic persona and zagging on that. And I don't think we looked at any visuals, but I had some visuals ready and a kind of a concept reel cut and some music, but a lot. We were on the same page. It was super cool. And I think, just going back to the first part of the question, what made us want to work with them besides the work and the the idea of what the movie could become. You just have to go off instinct, I think, in these choices too. And it just felt right. It's like immediately I think these things. It's the same way when you're casting actors or something and someone walks in, you're like, oh yeah, of course, it's the same. It felt really right.
Well, I love that. So Becky, I'm going to bring this over to you. So you had a script, a director, and a star, which that's a lot. Yeah. So,
exactly.
Which as we all know, doesn't always happen so cleanly and neatly.
Yeah.
I wish it did. So talk us through, I'd love to know from you as the producer, you have a pretty big package already going, from the get-go. What were your next steps in putting it together?
So we need the money so we can go make this. We didn't have any semblance of a budget at that point. Sometimes it varies, and because you guys are film students and this will be interesting, you could pay a line producer who is, I assume you guys know what line producers are, right? Okay. So industry standard is you throw them $5,000 and they will break down your script and budget it out and schedule it. And you will realistically know how much approximately it would cost to make this movie. We didn't do that. We had a sense of, we're making.
You're like, we didn't do the thing that normally is done, that everyone does.
Do it, but that was really because this was not a studio movie. We knew we were going to do it independently. Again, I think I just keep coming back to every time I think about it, and you guys have all seen the movie, so it was a really tricky tone to pull off. It is comedic, but it's also very romantic, and there's a surrealism to it, and it's really profound, and there's the sci-fi element. It's not straightforward, and that's what's so great about it. But so we weren't taking a studio path for it. And so I didn't know exactly what we would need, but I could kind of eyeball it. And we knew we were looking for approximately, fill in the blank. Actually, there's no reason for
I was going to say, can we just fill in the blank?
Yeah. Being recorded here. I am, but you get my point. No, we were like, if we could figure out getting $5 million to shoot this, that would be approximately great. And if it's a little less, that's okay. If it's a little more, terrific. But somewhere around 5 is where we thought it would hover. And so because Andy and Max and Andy Samberg and our company were repped at United Talent Agency, one of the talent agencies, they were handling the packaging and the sales of it. So they were holding our hands and sending it out to financiers. And so then we got, some bites on the line basically, and started taking meetings, and we had a good amount of interest, which was great. And then, truth be told, I think, to Max's point about instinct, when you're trying to find your money, it gets a little muddied, right? It's not as clean and sort of, I love these people. These are definitely the people to go with. It's, where's the highest bidder? I need the most money I can to make this movie, and let's hope that you're not insane. And it kind of, went from there. So we were fortunate enough to come upon a company called Limelight, and they ended up producing it. And I just, because this town is small and I get calls all the time about what were they like to work with, my 2 things that I always say are the money was real, which sadly is not always the case with indie financiers. So the proverbial checks were clearing. And really, the movie that you guys saw is the movie we all set out to make. So we had creative control in the way that we wanted to have. So it was certainly a process along the way, and I'm not painting a rosy picture. It was really challenging to make it, but I think Andy and Max and myself and Andy Samberg and everyone who was so intimately involved in it, the nucleus of making it, were so extremely proud of the end result. And I think, and I would say the same for, the financier. Everyone's just thrilled with the end result. So
I was going to say, as someone who's made a lot of indie movies, checks clearing is really the number one thing you want.
Yeah, I didn't realize the total importance of that until, having the opposite experience on something at one point. I was like, what do you mean you're not going to make payroll this week?
Correct.
What?
Correct.
So yeah, there's, that was.
I have been there, and you're like, what now?
Insane. Yeah.
So how long was the process from like getting that money to actually getting day one of shooting?
So Andy and Max, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we sort of officially got in bed with Limelight that like August, September, October, something like that of 2018. And then we started shooting April 16th, 2019. So the next steps of that were we found the financing, so we were good to go there. And then needed to find the co-lead opposite Andy. And so set about bringing on casting director and starting to find our, our co-lead.
Well, I want to talk about that a little bit, Max and Andy. So, and I say this having been in so many indie movie making until I was like, guys, I'm done with this. This is done. How many shoot days did you get?
So I think we did
20, like 21, 22 in there. We had like a day called for rain, and then also just a insane day where we drove out to the desert for like 6 hours, but around 21.
So 21 days is not a lot, but it is what is actually the normal for indie movies. I mean, that's generally what you get. So as a director, and this kind of, our students got 1 day to shoot a short.
Nice.
Wow.
And they got it done. I want to talk a little bit like, both of you, there's things you cut, there's things you can't keep, on a 21-day shoot, things have to go. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that process, because our students learned a lot about coverage this summer and what you need and what you don't need, especially on a 1-day shoot in COVID, where sometimes your COVID compliance officer, Joelle, I'm looking at you, might say, oh, you guys can't be this close in this scene, so we're just going to shoot from your legs down with face masks on, and we have to get creative. Joelle's just, I think, having flashbacks right now. No, this is literally what happened. We had a scene, and the COVID compliance officer was like, we have to only shoot from their legs down because they need to be wearing face shields because they're too close.
That sounds like a very creative solution and a very interesting scene. And I would say that, I'm serious, like that those kind of limitations sometimes, and Andy and I were lucky that we had been through film school where we were put through the ringer and made an insane thesis with like live animals and throwing bodies off a pier and all this stuff. Had to think about this stuff as we were moving into shooting, being told we couldn't do stuff in the same way. And a lot of times fire marshal things, like a lot of times the solutions that you come up with, and it was so great. Some screenwriters, like you're saying, Andy, they want to write for themselves or don't want to really be involved in production. Andy was always there. So even as we were working on the script and trying to find solutions for budgetary issues, it would be this collaboration kind of between everybody trying to come up with creative solutions to limitations. And you get great stuff through that thinking. You simplify, you're forced to think in a very straightforward way that makes moments better sometimes.
One example I can think of it just from the movie, that this wasn't like necessarily like a last minute thing that was changed, but we knew we had to make it a little more affordable. And there are certain things that in a movie that a line producer would just say, well, that means that should not be there because it's just too expensive, while not understanding that like, but that's a good joke. And there was a whole, there was a kind of a skydiving type sequence in there. And then became the scene where they're like, it was first a more elaborate skydiving thing. And we knew we wanted that thing in there. And again, any line producer would just say, throw that out. And so what we ended up doing, and I think it was actually written into the script like this, is I want them to steal a plane and crash a plane. It's only 3 shots. One shot is a wide of Andy and Cristin sneaking up to the airplane as the pilot walks away. They ended up doing it in a couple shots, rightfully so, but that's one shot. Shot number 2 is just locked off as they're inside the airplane and do some clouds behind them, so it's just fake, but only one single shot. And then the third shot is just a wide shot of the desert, and you just, CGI an airplane crashing. So it's really just 2 shots for something that is like, if a line producer reads that and says it's Niles and Sarah wait for a pilot to leave an airplane, and they go in and steal the airplane, and they're up in the sky messing around, and then something breaks and then they crash the airplane, that could be a $50 million shot there. But we did it in, I think that was one that we stole at the end of the day. But that also got a huge laugh. Like when we were watching, like we've seen it, like, with a bigger audience, like it was so satisfying when that gets a laugh, because what goes into it. We also know, which things are worth cutting, while others like are worth, finding a solution to, finding a way around, because the laugh is important sometimes.
I'm literally, just so you know, class, this is what happens. I'm literally having the same conversation on an indie movie for a client that we're helping produce, where it all resolves around a car crash, and the line producer is like, let's cut the car crash because it's too expensive. So just,
I mean,
that's literally the point of the movie.
I mean, that was the, like, another part of the montage when Sarah is on top of was standing out through the sunroof, and then he goes over a bump and she falls out. That was another one that was like immediate cut. And we talked about it. Like, there's a way to shoot this where you're just on Andy, and then you just throw a dummy behind, so you don't actually have to like be outside of the car when she falls off. And it achieves. I mean, everyone knows what happens because you see, a figure fall through the back window, and it doesn't need to be a really expensive shot. So there's always a way around.
Or anything like that. It was, the point of it is not seeing the body itself. Right. So we were able to shoot around it.
And shooting all the stuff too in a very straightforward way, because you don't have time to get coverage or really embellish it or overthink it and get fancy. It just makes it funnier because it feels straightforward and real when you're experiencing this stuff. Like the dance sequence we did at the beginning, Andy did that. I think did that in like a couple hours. It was insane how he nailed that. And it's like, we didn't have time to shoot it a bunch of different ways. We just shot it, and it makes it funnier because it's all in camera, and straightforward.
I love that dance sequence also, because my real dream in life that Becky knows is I want to make a dance movie more than anything. So any dance sequence makes me happy. So you finished the movie, and I want to talk a little bit about the festival circuit, because you guys had a huge festival. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Andy and Max, this was your first Sundance, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love it if you two could talk a little bit, and then Becky, I'm going to loop you in once we get to bidding war, but just that experience of going to the festival, kind of, were you prepared? What did you do to prepare? Like, what was that like?
I had never been, because I never wanted to go without having something in there. So it was just, I was very intimidated by it from afar, because I love the movies that come out of there. And I've had friends that have done the labs and stuff, and it always feels like this like cool kids club or something like that. And it was cool to go, and first just to say, like, it was electric. Everybody loved film. Everyone was super nice. That part of it was really cool. I wish I had, only regret is I didn't meet as many filmmakers as I wanted to, or see as many movies, just because we were busy doing cool stuff. But it was really cool to have the closure, I would say, with the movie, just because we were all staying in the same house too, to be together again and to be able to celebrate it, and not knowing it at the time, but to have the opportunity to see it in a theater with audiences before everything kind of closed down. That was super special. But Sundance is a thing where you've kind of, to me, I think we had already, the goal from the first time when we had met was, let's make this movie on an indie scale. Hopefully we could go to Sundance and sell it. So we had done everything up to that point to put ourselves in a position to do that. So it was just kind of, it was nice. It was celebratory. I personally had no idea how the movie played when we premiered it. And it was a whirlwind getting up to that point, just because Andy and I were sitting in the back, kind of pinching ourselves and like in and out of consciousness, and not really being able to hear how big the laughs were, what was going on. So just getting through that was super exciting. And then the experience that we had afterwards with selling it was just incredible, to have people react positively to a movie at Sundance, which I know doesn't always happen, was great in itself. I think it was easy to keep perspective, because as we've been talking about with process along the way, you just want to do the best job possible with any little choice, whether that's shooting coverage or not pissing off the COVID compliance officer, or, just presenting the movie in the right way when you're doing press the day before. You don't want to get ahead of yourself. You just want to make the best possible choices throughout, the journey, and then put yourself in a position to have a cool night where you get into a bidding war, which was insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have much else to add beyond the thing exceeded our expectations every step of the way, from that first meeting with Andy and Becky and them. That exceeded any expectations we had. We never thought anyone, any named person would ever want to do this thing, to making the movie, to getting the Sundance, to like Max was saying, that the thing that the memory that is, I think, will stick with me the most is he and I were sitting in the back 2 corner seats of the theater. There was hype going into the movie. It was a sold out screening. Hype is usually bad. I've tried to be a hopeful, positive person, but I also know there's a loud voice in my head that's like, oh, you should shut up now. And when, sitting in those corner seats, and when the lights went down, Sundance has a little trailer thing that comes up. I got a little emotional, because I knew where my parents and my wife and my brother were sitting, and where Max's family was sitting, and I, Max and I think held hands for a second. We're just like, because I flash back 7 years earlier when he and I first met, and have gone on this weird journey together. And I think part of this overwhelming emotional feeling was that we knew in 85 minutes the world might hate the movie now, and this could be the end of our careers. And so we're truly on the edge of this cliff. Who knows what'll happen, but the movie is no longer ours, as we slowly watch it leave. And luckily, and where that turned was, there's the Lonely Island Classics title card that comes up, before the movie even starts, and that came up, and the audience laughed at that. And that was this huge sigh of relief for both of us. Oh, this might be the right audience to watch this with. Yeah, it was just, this whole thing was just exceeded our expectations, including this after dinner bidding war. It's the night.
That's coming to Becky. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So the movie screens, does really well. There's some good reactions. Walk us through what happens, and also dive in a little bit about what a bidding war is, because we actually haven't touched on that.
Sure. It's funny, just even hearing Max and Andy talk about it too. It was a completely surreal experience. I think just the entirety of Sundance, I had never been before myself. And once the screening happened and the lights came up afterward, and it had been, I feel like it sounds like we are trying to be sort of fake humble. But we really didn't know. We liked the movie. We worked really hard on it, but we didn't know what the reaction would be. So, as Andy said, they first laugh. You're like, okay, good. They're liking something. It's a logo card, but they like something, and then the screening itself was so well received. So the lights come up, and people, I remember a bunch of agents or just friends who were there were kind of pinching my shoulder and good job. You could feel something was happening. And then Andy and Max and Andy and myself and a bunch of people, we go to this after party, and the vibe in the room is so great. And it's just, if I could, if there was sort of a physical manifestation of the energy, it was, you could see the line in the graph going straight up. And so in terms of bidding war, I just kept getting pulled out into the cold by our sales agents at UTA with, let's huddle over here so no one can hear us. And this offer has come in and it's a little low, but okay, oh, this one, so we're gonna ignore that one. This one's come in and now it's a little higher. And so it was truly getting ratcheted up. Then we all went out to dinner after that, and I kept getting pulled out also, and, was on my phone. And I remember coming back downstairs and I grabbed Max and Andy Samberg, and I was like, stop drinking. We're going to have to go to have some meetings tonight. This is not going to be something, we had been warned this could play out over days. You may be back in Los Angeles, back at work, and then we'll see if we get any offers. So our expectations had been managed very well, but when that clearly wasn't going to happen, we're like, okay, pinch ourselves. Not that we were drinking that heavily, but you know what I mean. I was like, this is serious. We're going to go do what other people's, what I've read about other people's movies happening in their oral histories of Sundance. And so then we had these late night meetings that stretched really into like the wee hours of morning. I remember really clearly Andy Samberg being like, I want to go to bed. And I was like, I feel ya, no. And it just, so it was truly like 4 or 5 in the morning when it all crescendoed. And I know you'll ask about this, but, and that we ended up going with Hulu and Neon.
So I guess, and since the number is out there, or at least the public number is out there, 17.5 million rounded up to, I saw 22 million with some guarantees. Now, and I'm leading the question a little bit for the students, so, just bear with me.
Sure.
So, like you said earlier, where sometimes when you're trying to get money for the beginning, you're kind of going whoever is going to put up the most money.
Yeah.
This time around, because we're also talking about money, and this question's for everyone, was it clear Hulu was the right fit from the beginning? Was it the money? Like, how did you guys make that final decision? Because you were getting up there with some other bidders from...
Yeah, we had, I mean, again, we all couldn't be prouder of the film. And I think even given that, we were like shocked at what was happening and how quickly this was getting ratcheted up. There were other factors at play. The year before at Sundance, Amazon came and they were trying to make a splash, and they bought Brittany Runs a Marathon and with Jillian Bell and Late Night with Mindy Kaling for huge sums of money. And the story coming out of Sundance that year was Amazon is in business. And so we could get the sense that Hulu was somewhat trying to make that statement as well. We had not talked through what home exactly we wanted for this. It really came down to, for us, and of course money played a factor, but it came down to, for us, as we were in those late night meetings, sober as we could be, what Max said, instinct. Like, we could see, and I think especially Tom Quinn, who runs Neon, and they had just done Parasite, he was our kind of person. And he loved this movie and understood this movie and understood how to release it. And at this point, we were pre-pandemic. So we were thinking of it more as a Neon movie than we were a Hulu movie. And Parasite hadn't won the Oscar, but it had, it was certainly a huge deal, and we loved Tom. So it was a lot of, I think Andy put it well, like, when the movie premiered, it like wasn't ours anymore. And so then we wanted to make sure that if it was someone else's and it was going out in the world in a real way, that it had great parents and it had, someone looking out for it in the way that we had all looked out for it so much. So that was a part of it. Of course, the money played into it. But we had a lot of suitors. And so ultimately, went with the people who we believed would release it in the way that we wanted, and just deeply understood it. Like, there is a terrible version of a marketing campaign for this movie. And we felt like, no, they will do the great version of the marketing campaign for this movie. And I think they did. So that was
true. I never thought of it, but I could see this marketing campaign go bad real quickly.
I mean, we all, and Max and Andy, like, we'll all start twitching if we think about it too much, but that goes to every step along the way. When casting it, some of the ideas coming our way, whether it be from the financier or from agents or whatever, there's a real sweaty version of this movie where you're like, oh God. And we wanted so badly for Sarah to be played by Cristin Milioti because we could see this great chemistry between Andy and Cristin. They were Hepburn and Tracy to me. Like, they went toe to toe, and it was, a beautiful thing to see. They're in the supporting cast, there were just things there are choices you make along the way that you can hear the like marketing people behind closed doors encouraging you to do. And that's also the beauty of making something independently. You don't have that, that pressure. So yes, there is a terrible marketing campaign for this movie. There is a terrible co-star for this movie. There's a terrible everything, but we were really fortunate not to go down any of those paths.
I love that. So Max and Andy, I'm going to kind of come over to you for kind of one last big question before I turn it over to the students. So everyone get ready with good questions. Hint, hint. This is your time shortly to shine. So you do this huge deal. You're probably pitching yourself. I know I would be. I'd be like, what? And then the pandemic hits. So I'd love for you to talk about kind of going through that as, you know, first-time feature writer directors, having this huge sale, thinking it was going to come to theaters near you, and kind of that process of maybe no theaters ever again.
I would like the sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that the mentality that Niles has in the movie, this kind of shrug and drink a beer, that it's not a coincidence that the people behind the movie kind of, at least I'm speaking for myself, but I feel like that's some of that with Max as well, where it's like it's too bad that at the same time, like, what is anything anyways? Like, what does it really, what does it really matter?
Nothing matters.
Yeah. And like, you know, and I don't want, you know, things do matter. Life is not meaningless, or not totally meaningless. But I have just tried to always just kind of, especially, you know, from when we started shooting the movie, I can't focus on any negative thoughts that might come up from that. I think you kind of have to just like, okay, well, now you're on this, the path is leading this way, and it's not leading the way that we thought it would. We're not going to have a big premiere or a big party with friends or whatnot. It's but we so I have to look at the other side. We had a cool party. We had a big premiere at Sundance. More people get to see the movie this way. We're not up against Tenet and Wonder Woman and Mulan and Fast and the Furious. So I don't know. It's it was very weird on our opening night, on our premiere night when our premiere night. We premiered at 9 p.m. on our coast on Hulu, and my wife and I we watched another movie on Netflix. As the country was getting to see our movie for the first time. There was no you know,
it was weird, right? Samberg called me at 8:58 so we could be on the phone together as it premiered.
Yeah,
like,
it was
weird.
That was weird. It was super weird.
Well, just know I was watching at 9:01. Just so you know. I was like first in.
We also joke, we made a documentary. We just didn't realize it. You know, we're all the time loop. It's crazy.
You literally should just premiere on Nat Geo, and that should be.
No, totally. But Max, aren't you so glad we had that Sundance premiere and that we all got to see it in a theater with the audience reaction?
Yeah. I mean, the drive-in thing is cool. Like, I feel like the cool thing to me about the Neon Hulu deal was like Neon was amazing, but then Hulu, and I feel like Hulu's kind of won the pandemic too, just from a programming standpoint, with how they like established themselves as a very well curated brand, and with like a sensibility with at least the kind of stuff that we're making. So like to get that deal out of the way, or to get that component of the deal out of the way with Neon ahead of time, everyone was great, and it was easy to kind of like call an audible and pivot it, you know, into this new plan, and we were prepared for that. And it's like Andy said, not having any expectations along the way helps. It's like anything else, you can't control it, but I think we were still able to make that cultural splash in a really cool way, and it became, I would argue, you know, the pressures of like a box office number were alleviated and removed, and it became this other thing. It became more of a cultural moment, I think, for the movie than it would have if we were competing with these bigger movies. And I think when I look back on the summer, and when people look back on the summer too, I think they'll remember it too as like the summer that Palm Springs came out and they were stuck in their home, and like, you know, they're thinking about that.
looking at pools and trees and outdoors.
That honestly was in our minds as we were figuring out marketing, and Hulu and Neon were really great and worked closely with us. But, you know, we were like, we should feature something that feels like an escape, like the palm trees, like something. Cause yeah, we're all stuck in our houses. But I think we did ultimately, I would give anything to not be in a pandemic, but we made some lemonade out of these lemons because I think it ultimately got so many more eyeballs on it than it might have.
Yeah. And I do hope, I don't know if these conversations have happened, Becky, but they're way too early to be happening now because the world is still shut down for the foreseeable future. But whenever it opens up again, I do hope that there is some type of, you know, we do have some special screenings because like we were lucky enough, and I always remind myself, like I saw it with an audience 10, 15 times between like some of the various screenings we had. And it plays so well with an audience. And so I already got that fulfilled, but it's a bummer that other people didn't get to actually experience it with an audience. So I'm hope that that'll happen.
For sure. We actually, yes, confirmed.
By the way, I feel like there's you guys are texting each other like, what's happening?
No, I'm excited. It's funny. I'm sure you read the Brian Lord interview with the UCLA symposium, but I agree with what he was saying. I think when we can safely be out of our houses, whether that is a few months from now or whenever, we are raring to go to the concerts and the sporting events, but also to the movies. And we will, you know, the good thing about doing this with Neon is they have their Alamo Draft House. They have spaces that I think there will be plenty of special Palm Springs re-release, essentially.
I'm in. I will be there.
Me too.
And just before I turn it over to the students, I think, and I don't want to be, you guys will quote me because I'm sure you know, it was like the most watched movie ever in like the space of 24 hours. I mean, the stats were amazing. Becky, feel free to yell at the stats at me that I didn't get right.
I mean, you're probably elevating it beyond what it was, so I'm going to let you talk. Yes, but no, we were so proud. Yeah, it was great.
Well, I love the movie, so I'm going to let our students ask some good, thoughtful questions because I've been talking to them for a month now. So who from our students would like to go first and ask the question? Fern, was that a hand? No? Aya, do you want to go first? Are you laughing? Okay, Aya, I'm going to put you first because you were laughing and you got to unmute yourself. This is a fun game on Zoom, guys. Unmuting.
Well, the one question I really had, like, basically got answered. Really was about how it went on a streaming service instead of being like premiered being in theaters. I was just thinking about how it was kind of like, I don't know how to word this. I wasn't prepared. Sorry.
I gave you guys like a lot of hints to prepare, by the way. There were a lot of hints to prepare.
I think I know what you're asking. I don't mean to ask you, but there's two ways to see your movies, right? You go to the movie theater or streamers. And when the offer started coming in, Hulu's offer actually came in separately from Neon's. And we felt, we had turned our lives upside down to make this movie for almost 2 years. And we felt like, and I think this speaks, I'm just old, but like, I didn't want it just on a streaming service. We wanted it also in the theater. And so Hulu and Neon worked together a lot, and the agents did a really good job of kind of back channeling. Like, they don't want to just go with you. They want definitely this thing to exist in theaters, if at all possible. So that's how it came about. They partnered up and then came back to us with a revised option. And we were like, yeah, let's talk to these people too. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
I like that. I also did not know, by the way, that's a good question, Aya, that they kind of were put together, not come in together.
Yeah, I was thinking about how it's like quarantine and like you didn't expect this to happen, but it did. And with having that partnership with Hulu, like you still got the movie spread to people. Luckily, you still got people to see it.
There's a weird, I keep like saying this to my husband, as I think Andy and Max and I and everyone involved are still to some degree probably processing the response to our like little baby movie that we were just like hopeful to sell, and now it's become such a thing and we're so proud. But I think there's a it's taken on something else because of the way it was released. And, you know, as Max was saying, I think we got really fortunate that we did find ourselves with our pants down to some degree of like, oh, we can't do theaters. What do we do now? You know, and Hulu, they've been incredible with television. They've Handmaid's Tale, Normal People, The Great, all of that, but they haven't really in movies yet. And so this was also, they put so much behind it because of that. And we were really the beneficiaries of their effort.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Is that Matt in the background, Becky?
No, how I wish. I was like, oh, you have to go on a bike ride while I'm doing this panel and the kids are on their iPads. You sure? Yeah, no, it's not me.
I love that. Joel has a question. The questions are coming through in the chat. Joel and then Yohab, I'm coming back to you.
I might have I think me and Yoab have very similar questions. My question is, so you guys were saying how in the first many drafts, the time loop was not even in there. So what made you think, oh, a time loop into this romance movie, and what made you feel like, okay, now it's ready for us to start sending it out? How do you know it's ready for that?
This is a great question.
So there's two parts to that. First, why the time loop, then why or when is it ready? Why the time loop? Well, let's get serious for a second. Let's talk about marriage.
Wow, did not see where that was going.
There were two things that coincided. In one, I got married in 2015, and when you're married and you're working every day, you start to you naturally fall into a routine. And I know Max had been feeling similar things at the same time too, but we didn't really know. I didn't know what to do with that. And then just to get political, just for a very brief second, on November 9th, or November 8th, 2016, Donald Trump won the presidency. November 9th was the next day. It's also the day of the wedding in the movie. There's a dark cloud that kind of hangs over all of, there was all of the country, at least I felt. And I felt like, if this guy can be elected president, then the laws that govern humanity and decency and society no longer exist. Life is meaningless. You might as well just shrug it off, drink a beer, float on a raft in a pool, and eat burritos all day. And I'd say 60% of Niall's viewpoint was already there, but it kind of all of a sudden made sense, his viewpoint. And then in that month that followed that election, I found myself just checking the news every single day, waiting for something to happen. And everything felt the same, nothing's changing. This guy is president. I was waiting for something else to come in. And so that's when Max and I were really chatting every day about the movie. And these two things in our life are how our own lives kind of started feeling like routines, as well as a part of the reason for that may have been because of this person. We were like, maybe we should do the time loop thing. And the movie was already kind of drifting into a sci-fi realm, but that seemed to be the one that kind of, it was a month after that election that when we decided, or when that draft was started, where there was a time loop in there. And then when the draft is done, I was given a piece of advice from an old teacher, I believe, that you are done writing when either your friends or your peers that read it say it's good to go, or anytime you look at it, you want to vomit. And I don't remember which happened for the draft that went to Andy and Becky. If it was the vomit, I felt like I wanted to vomit, or if it was the friends, or it was a combination of both those. But that's kind of it's when you can't look at it anymore. But then once we started working with them again, I was able to look at it again because there was new life in the room. When it was done after that, that's when it's when Andy Samberg and Becky Sloviter say it's done.
Or the Sundance deadline is
God bless you. Yes. And then that's come, and then we begged for an extension. It's one of those.
Having been there 3 times, to me, the Sundance deadline is the scariest one out of everything. That is a real thing.
I think the other thing, and just in a like, keep going no matter what anyone says kind of way, I had so many people saying to me, doesn't feel like a Sundance movie. I don't think you're getting in. And I was like, really? Okay. And ultimately, and I'll never forget Max calling. I think I texted you like 2 or 3 weeks before I thought we were going to hear. And I was like, they're going to call you. Will you make me your next call when you find out one way or another? And so I can't remember. I think it was a text. Maybe you called, but either way, I remember I like immediately like pulled my car over and was like, ah! Like the relief and the excitement, but also the relief, you know? So yes, those deadlines are not fun, but.
And they called early too. It was like 2 weeks. It was like, we were one of the first films to get in, and it was like also a U.S. dramatic competition movie, which is like, oh, that's a serious one. They like our movie. Yeah.
Totally. It's fun.
That's.
I have been there. The yes phone call is pretty fun. It's a pretty fun.
I'll take it.
Next question from this. Yoav, did we answer your question? Sweet. 2-for-1 special. I think Cheyenne knows what it's like to be done with something and hate when Rachel's like, I got one more note. I want to punch you in the face. She's smiling. It's real. Any other questions for our team? Oh yeah, Aya, sorry. You were in a little box, but yes, Aya, go again.
Okay. This is for Becky. How do you approach starting pre-production and also like packaging a film? Like, what's your take on approaching that?
Approaching it how so? Meaning like getting it done?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Say that again, like just in processing these past couple years, I remember really distinctly like having this conversation with my husband of like, okay, we have the financing. We knew Cristin Milioti was going to play opposite Andy. We were going, but we weren't like, we didn't have our dates yet. We didn't have like an actual schedule. We had a schedule, but it didn't feel real for whatever reason. And my husband's a producer also, and we were just talking about this very weird moment of, it's like this gray area of like, are we doing this? Is this a movie? Or is this something we're going to talk about and like it falls apart for some reason? And like, I think as a producer, you are this engine of go, 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 go. And I remember I was thinking back Rachel, you probably asked the question to Andy and Max, but I remember really clearly, I was driving on Topanga Canyon after having a conversation with our line producer, probably in January-ish. And I called Andy and Max and like merged the calls together. I was like, okay, I need to talk to both of you. Are you around? And we all get on and I was like, we have to cut 10 pages out of this script and like quickly. Because we had the money and we had this green light, but we weren't backing into our number. And they were rock star troopers and we're like, okay, like we'll figure this out. And yes. And I was basically like, you can't tell me no, let's figure it out. Bye, like a true lunatic producer, but like, that's how it goes. And so my approach was like this very single-minded, we are making this movie. And I think that spirit takes you really far in this town. You know, if you're just in a refuse to take no for an answer, but in a pragmatic way. I wasn't like, no, I'm sorry that we're not backing into our number. We have to shoot the script as is. I was like, okay, we got to take some pages out without losing anything that is vital. And so there were plenty of things that I think were heartbreaks to lose, but as you've seen, we're so proud of the end result. It didn't ultimately kill us to take them out. So the approach, like I keep joking, like pragmatic and sober is my middle name. Like just, you gotta work with what you got.
Gotcha.
So,
Thank you.
That's such great advice for everyone, writer, director, producer. Like, you have to believe you can pull it off before you can get anyone else to believe, right? From a PA to a casting director to a line producer, like,
I totally agree. And Max and Andy made it very easy. Like there was never, I've worked on a lot of movies over the years. I have not believed in most of them as much as I have believed in this one, you know? So I knew how good it was, but I'm so sorry for a naked child. But okay. Oh, he's not naked. Sorry, guys.
This is the most quarantine moment of all time.
Yes, it is.
Hi.
Say hi.
Hey.
But they made it like, it was easy to want to back them, obviously, and like deliver and just push, but it, you know, there's plenty of times where it falls off the rails. But I think, again, like if the spirit is, I'm so sorry, I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. Noah.
Well, that's a perfect, because I want to be respectful of your guys' time and stay on schedule. So lightning round of, you know, one last piece of advice to our class. And then Becky, you'll go do whatever.
Bye.
Who knows? Yeah. Andy, we want to start with you. And last, I think you have to unmute you and Max.
Just a piece of advice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna word it I'm gonna do it by answering Amir's question here.
Yes.
If you could tell your younger selves one thing, what would you say? Like, so in that spirit, what would I tell my younger self, or who is starting out that journey? I would say, let yourself be weird and embrace the weirdness that is in you when you have like a little voice or your instinct or whatever you want to call it, that gut feeling, like follow that gut feeling. If you know you want to do movies, then go after movies and just take that leap and go after movies or TV shows or whatever it is. But also when doing that, don't be safe with it. Like, and experiment and allow yourself to explore those weirder parts of your brain, because like I am of the belief that there is no unique experience. I think there's only, or emotion, there's only like, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 9 feelings or emotions or experiences. And so the more specific you are with your own, then therefore the more universal it'll end up feeling. And so, but it's the stuff that is in the middle, when people are just being safe and not like forcing themselves to dig to the painful, weird parts. That's what ends up, not being very deep and not getting anywhere.
That was like an ad for Austin. Stay weird. I like it.
I was thinking the exact same thing. We're like, it's an age thing. Keep on weird. Yes.
I was like, did you just like promote Austin?
I love that advice. I love that advice though, because I do think, and I think that's why people like us, as we were coming up, and I'm sure you guys too, connect to this art in a certain way, right? Like if you can relate to it, if you see yourself in it, if it makes you feel a little less alone, like lean into the weird, I think is such great advice, dude. Totally agree.
Is that your also line? Or you want to do something new? Or you want to double down?
I'm not gonna steal Andy Siara's life advice. No, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Right, I'm just gonna go, guys, because these kids, my God, excuse the interruption, pardon the interruption. I would just probably take it back to what I was saying to Aya, like determination and perseverance will get you really far in this town. And you also want to balance that with knowing when to walk away from certain things, when you're in bed with the wrong people, when you've made a mistake and you need to pivot. Everyone will make a million mistakes. So looking at that in a sober way. But again, like all of those buzzwords you hear a lot from people, grit and, stick-to-itiveness and all of that. But I really do find, like, if you are taking it seriously and working hard, you will succeed.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Max, close it down for us as our director. Bring it home.
I would say
you're the ending of this.
I would say you're all very lucky right now to be young and maybe not creating and indulging the medium for the first time, but just cling to to the joy that you're feeling now when you have a breakthrough in the process, and love the process and bring joy to the process. And don't forget to have fun and always be kind of exploring and focusing on the process. Like the best way I've heard filmmaking described just creatively is it's a decision collage or a choice collage. So bring play to it, have fun. We had a mentor that said, storytelling is play, so don't take it too seriously or else it's not worth it. And definitely what Andy said, be weird. And also find your people that you love to work with and cling to them. And even if you don't like to work with them, find your classmates, your generation of storytellers, and lean on one another and trade ideas and find inspiration in those connections, because that's all it is, it's collaborative.
I definitely think, and I had a very similar experience to you, Andy. I didn't find my people in high school. I went to film school, I found some people. And then when I got out, I met Becky and Jesse, and like the people I met at 20 are still the people I work with all day long. And that's what happens.
Yeah.
It really does.
And that's, I think, an important thing to also remember is like, you're all young, you have plenty of time, be patient, enjoy life. You're going to be doing the movies and TV shows or whatever is next that is going to, dictate this next generation. And like, there's no need to like feel bummed if, things aren't going your way yet. Because again, I never made any money until I was 30. I didn't have like, and even like, I really had a break in this industry until I was over 30. Again, I didn't really focus on it until I was 27, but again, 27.
So you're saying it took you 3 years. That was your take.
Well, no, I don't want to say it like that.
Prodigy.
That makes you sound
That's like great. I just want to break down what you just said when you were like, I didn't start till I was 27, by the way. Right, guys, this is why you need Max, so you can call someone out when they're just dropping lies.
31, 32, whatever. I don't know. I got very, very lucky. But again, I wallowed in self-pity plenty. There's no need to wallow in self-pity, especially where you guys are now. There's plenty of time to leave your mark.
Well, that is a perfect way to end. Becky, Max, and Andy, a huge thank you. This was awesome. One of my favorite movies I've seen in a long time, so I really can't thank you enough. And a movie the husband and I both love, which is very shocking.
Yeah, we're hearing that a lot. It's cool.
Yeah, which is not often the case. I'll tell you that for free. So a huge thank you, Andy. A special thank you for coming in and helping out and mentoring. And we will let you know when we plan our virtual gala for the first time. So
I'll be there.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, guys.